so I never thought my family would end up in such a mess. But here I am, sitting in a quiet corner of the library with Wi-Fi and the laptop, trying to figure out how unhinged my parents are. For context, I'm 17 and a senior in high school. I've always been a good student, not in a braggy way, but in a head down, do my homework, give it my all kind of way. My parents loved to joke that I was born with a calculator in one hand and a pencil in the other. My sister, who's 15, is the opposite. She's not bad academically, but she's more into sports, her friends, and TikTok than school, and usually scrapes by with C's. This semester, things changed. I worked harder than ever and ended up at the top of my class with straight A's. My sister failed 2 core subjects, so she had to attend summer school. Naturally, I thought my parents would finally acknowledge my hard work. Maybe they would treat me to a nice dinner or give me a pat on the back. Nope. Instead, they decided my sister needed a morale boost. Their solution? A week-long vacation at a lake cabin 3 hours away. That would have been fine, except they didn't invite me. To be clear, they specifically left me behind. Here's the kicker. They drove me to a halfway point, stopped in a random parking lot outside a hiking trail, told me to get out. My mom's exact words were that it builds character. She said it would help me with one of my college essays. My dad chimed in with a grin, saying, "Sleeping under the stars would be an adventure." My sister just sat in the back seat, looking smug and scrolling on her phone. I thought they were joking. I laughed and said, "Okay, funny prank, now let's go." But my mom just shoved my backpack at me, the one I'd packed thinking I was going with them, and said I would thank them later. Then they drove off. I stood there in shock in a parking lot by the woods, watching their taillights disappear. I had no food beyond a couple of granola bars, no cash except for $20 I had stashed in my wallet. No idea what to do. So I did what I always do. I problem solved. I walked the trail for a while until I found a clearing by the river. I unrolled my hoodie and used it as a pillow. I lay there staring at the sky, the stars cutting sharp lines through the black, and thought, maybe this is the character building they meant. Maybe this is the essay. Here's the thing. I've been stressing about Common App prompts for months. Every draft feels like it's missing something raw and real. And now, here I was, abandoned in the woods with nothing. So I wrote by flashlight. Scribbling out of anger and desperation, I wrote about resilience. I wrote about watching the car leave and realizing I was on my own. I wrote about how education has always been my anchor in a family that rewards the loudest voice, not the hardest work. I wrote about finding peace in the stars while I tried to ignore the chill creeping into my bones. I poured every ounce of frustration into that draft. I didn't even think about polishing it. I just let it spill. When morning came, I hiked back to the parking lot and walked 2 miles into town. I bought a bus ticket home with that $20. I made it back before they even texted me. They didn't text me though, not even once. No, "Hey, are you okay?" Nothing. They returned from their vacation sunburnt and relaxed, complaining about traffic. Meanwhile, I was at the kitchen table editing my essay. My mom glanced at me and said I survived, didn't I? That's the spirit. My dad chuckled and said, "That's our little nerd." I didn't argue, I didn't blow up, I just filed it away. A week later, one of my teachers encouraged me to submit my essay to a local youth writing contest. I didn't think much of it, but I sent it in. And then things got wild. The essay won, not just the contest, it got picked up by the local paper. They ran it as a feature. Suddenly people in town were talking. Teachers congratulated me, and neighbors called my parents asking if the story was true. My parents? They lost their minds. They cornered me in the kitchen, furious. My mom said I'd made them look like monsters. My dad yelled about airing family business in public. My sister accused me of being dramatic and trying to ruin her vacation. But it's too late. The paper ran it. My name is on it, and the kicker? Someone called CPS after reading it. Now my parents are pacing around the house, terrified, waiting for a knock on the door. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting here thinking they told me it builds character. Maybe it did. Update 1. When I wrote the first post, my parents were pacing like caged animals waiting for CPS to arrive. It was everything I expected and more. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. My mom was in the kitchen, cleaning the counters obsessively, as if tidiness could erase what was in the newspaper. My dad sat in his recliner staring at the muted TV. My sister was scrolling through TikTok pretending nothing was wrong, and then the bell rang. My mom froze. My dad muttered under his breath. I got up and opened the door. A woman stood there with a clipboard and a badge, and she introduced herself, calm but serious, and said that she was there to follow up on a report about my safety. You could almost hear my mom's blood pressure rise. She rushed over, her voice high and overly sweet, insisting it was a misunderstanding, that I was fine, that everything was fine. The CPS worker raised an eyebrow and said she still needed to talk to me privately. This made my parents panic even more. My dad tried to argue, saying there was no need, but she cut him off with one sentence. If you refuse, I can call law enforcement. So they backed off. We sat at the dining table, just me and the CPS worker. She asked me to explain what happened the night my parents left me. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't make it sound worse. I told her exactly what happened. How they dropped me off in the parking lot, told me to sleep under the stars, left me with barely any food or money, and then drove away. How I walked into town the next morning after buying a bus ticket home. She asked if I felt unsafe at home. I told her the truth. My parents didn't hit me, but they don't protect me either. They undermine me, dismiss me, and think neglect is a twisted lesson in resilience. She wrote everything down, nodding slowly, and asked if I had anyone outside the house who supported me. That was the first time I felt the knot in my chest loosen. Because I do. Teachers, my school counselor, even my boss at the tutoring center where I work weekends. I named names and she seemed relieved I had a network. So she left me with a card and told me to call if I ever felt unsafe again. Then she went to talk to my parents. I don't know exactly what they told her, but judging by the raised voices and frantic hand movements, it wasn't smooth. My mom kept insisting it was just a creative parenting technique. My dad tried to argue I was never in danger and that I was smart enough to figure it out. At one point I heard my mom snap that I was exaggerating for attention, which only made the CPS worker's tone sharper. She stayed professional, but I caught a few lines. Neglect isn't a teaching tool. It doesn't matter if he's smart. You're still responsible for his safety. When the worker finally left, my parents looked drained. My mom turned on me instantly, accusing me of humiliating them. My dad muttered about how I should have kept quiet, and my sister just sat there wide-eyed, not saying a word. The next day, my English teacher pulled me aside. She had read the article in the paper and told me she was proud of me. Then she dropped a bomb. She had sent my essay to a friend of hers who works as an admissions counselor at a local college. Apparently they were impressed. She said I might get some interest from schools beyond the ones I had applied to. That shocked me. For once my words, the same ones my parents mocked as nerdy, were opening doors. Later in the cafeteria, a couple of classmates I barely talked to approached me and said they had read the piece too. One said it resonated with them because their parents also dismissed their hard work. Another simply said respect for a kid who's usually invisible. That felt huge. Meanwhile, my parents started to panic even more. They worried more about their reputation than anything else. My mom ranted about neighbors whispering. My dad grumbled about co-workers making jokes. They tried damage control. My mom cornered me one night and said I needed to write a follow-up essay clarifying that it was all dramatized. She wanted me to frame it as creative writing. I told her no. She snapped that I was ungrateful and ruining the family's image. My dad took a softer approach. He sat me down and said he knew I didn't mean for this to go so far, but if CPS kept looking into it, it could ruin us all. He suggested I just stay quiet and not poke the bear. I looked him in the eye and said, "You already poked it when you left me in a parking lot." He didn't have a response. Here's where things took a turn I didn't expect. My boss at the tutoring center pulled me aside during my shift. She told me she had also read the article, apparently. It was making the rounds on Facebook. She said if I ever needed a place to stay, I could use the spare room at her house. And she also offered to write me a great letter of recommendation. I don't think I've ever felt safer than in that moment. Not because I needed to move in, but because someone saw me. At home, things got worse. My mom started monitoring my phone and laptop, muttering about not letting me write any more slander. She tried to ground me, but I ignored her. I'm 17, applying to colleges, and working a job. She can't ground me like I'm 10. My dad has defaulted to silence, nursing his pride with beers in the recliner. My sister is oddly quiet too. I think even she realizes this blew up bigger than she expected. The irony? She's the one who failed her classes, but somehow I'm the villain. Yesterday, CPS called me directly. They wanted to check in and said they'd do another visit soon. I felt relieved knowing they were still watching. But when I told my parents, my mom's face twisted like she had bitten into something sour. She hissed that I was keeping them on the hook. No, I told her, you put yourselves there. My parents still think this is about humiliation. For me, it's about survival, about not letting their neglect be buried under excuses. And the best part, every time my mom snaps about CPS, I remember her words in that parking lot. It builds character. Yeah, it did. Just not the way she wanted. Update 2. When I posted my last update, CPS had just been through the house and my parents were acting like their reputations were on the line. That was bad enough, but since then, things have gone from tense silence to full-blown screaming matches, half-truths and community gossip that won't die down. If I thought this whole mess would blow over quickly, I was completely wrong. CPS came back, this time with 2 workers instead of 1. They split us up again, me in the dining room, my parents in the living room, my sister sulking upstairs. The new worker, a guy this time, asked sharper questions. What does a normal day at your house look like? Who makes sure you're fed? Do you feel like you can talk to your parents when something's wrong? I told him the truth, that meals are an afterthought and that my parents see me more as a trophy to show off than a kid to support. And that when I talk to them, it usually turns into me being told to toughen up. Then he asked the big question, did I want to stay here? I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud felt risky. Finally, I said I wanted stability, whether it came from this house or somewhere else. He nodded like that was all he needed. Meanwhile, my parents were in the other room doing their best concerned parent act. I could hear bits and pieces, my mom's voice becoming syrupy sweet about how much they value independence, and my dad muttering that I was just dramatic. At one point, my mom threw in the phrase creative character building again, which made the worker pause mid-scribble. After CPS left, my parents announced we were having a family meeting. Translation, an ambush. They sat me at the table and started damage control. My mom said she'd been thinking and maybe they had miscalculated how their actions came across. My dad added that people outside the family don't understand our dynamic and were trying to twist things. I sat there listening, arms crossed. My mom asked me to confirm to CPS next time that I knew they loved me and that I never doubted it. My dad chimed in with the classic, "We're all just trying to do our best." I asked him one question. "If you love me so much, why did you leave me in a parking lot with nothing but $20 and a backpack?" Silence. My mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish, and my dad looked down at the table and nobody had an answer. That was the end of the meeting. The grocery clerk asked me how I was doing. A teacher I barely know told me she admired my honesty. Parents of kids at my school gave me sympathetic smiles at pickup. It was surreal. For me, it felt like validation. For my parents, it felt like humiliation. They started snapping at neighbors, avoiding social events, even skipping church because people were staring. One night, my mom stormed into my room and accused me of ruining her social life. She said her friends were whispering about the parking lot story and asking uncomfortable questions. I told her maybe they were whispering because it was true. She didn't like that answer. Here's a twist. My sister finally broke her silence. She cornered me in the hallway one night and said she didn't ask for any of this. She hated that I'd written the essay and said now everyone looked at her like she was the spoiled one. She told me I destroyed the family over one stupid night. I told her it wasn't one night, it was years of me being ignored while she got all the free passes. That the essay wasn't meant to ruin her. It was me trying to process what happened. She didn't argue. She just looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore and walked away. The silver lining came from school. My counselor pulled me aside after class and she told me if things at home got worse, she could reconnect me with resources. It felt nice. I felt like my future wasn't tied to this house. The real breaking point came last weekend. CPS showed up again, but this time, while my parents were arguing, the worker walked in as my mom shouted at me about airing dirty laundry, and my dad told her to calm down. It was chaos. The worker didn't even blink. She asked me to pack a bag and come with her for the night. It was just a temporary placement to give everyone space. I grabbed my backpack and left, and that night I stayed with a host family 2 towns over. They were kind, normal, and quiet. I sat at their kitchen table eating spaghetti, and it hit me. This is what it's supposed to feel like. A home, not a battlefield. When I came back the next day, my parents were cold. They accused me of playing victim to get sympathy. My mom hissed that CPS had no right to take me, and my dad muttered about government overreach, but I wasn't shaken anymore. The overnight stay showed me I had options. I wasn't trapped here forever. CPS didn't just drop by this time, they scheduled it. 2 workers, case manager, and a uniformed officer showed up at the door. Not to take me away, but to sit everyone down and make things clear. We were all in the living room, my mom perched on the couch, arms crossed like she was holding herself together by sheer force. My dad sat slouched beside her, staring at the carpet, and my sister stood behind them, chewing her nails. I sat in the chair closest to the CPS workers, which made my mom glare as if I'd betrayed her with my choice of furniture. The case manager started by laying out what they'd seen so far: neglect, emotional abuse, unstable environment. She said outright that the night in the parking lot was unacceptable. Leaving a minor like that wasn't teaching resilience. It was abandonment. My mom jumped in, voice high, insisting it was all blown out of proportion. She called my essay creative exaggeration. The officer shut that down quickly, saying it wasn't an exaggeration when they had my own testimony, receipts from the bus ticket I bought, and corroboration from neighbors who'd seen me walk back into town alone the next morning. That's when my dad tried to smooth things over, mumbling about cultural misunderstandings and parenting differences. The case manager leaned forward and said, "There's a difference between discipline and neglect. What you did was neglect." You could see my dad deflate like a balloon. The case manager turned to me and asked if I wanted to stay here or if I wanted them to find me an alternative placement until I turned 18. The room froze, my mom practically shrieking, saying I was manipulating them, that I'd been poisoned against the family. My dad weakly suggested we should work things out privately. My sister just stared at me wide-eyed, and me? I took a breath and said, "I want stability. If you can guarantee it here, fine. If not, I'd rather be somewhere else." That was it. That was the line that cracked everything open. My mom lost it. She stood up, pacing, ranting that I'd embarrassed her, ruined her reputation. Now I was trying to escape responsibility. She called me ungrateful, selfish, and dramatic. The officer stepped between us, calm but firm, telling her to sit down. My dad tugged her arm, whispering for her to stop, which only made her whip around and snap that he never supported her, not once. It was chaos. Then my sister started crying, not for me, but for herself. She blurted out that she was sick of being compared to me, that she hated being the failure, and that she never asked to be dragged into this. My mom tried to comfort her, saying we needed to stick together as a family. But my sister shoved her off and shouted that sticking together was what got us here. That was the first time I saw my sister say something real, unfiltered, and it shut the room up. The CPS workers didn't force a decision that day. They said they'd file for ongoing monitoring and would be making regular visits. They told me I had the right to request a temporary placement if things escalated. Then they left, and when the door closed, the house exploded. My mom turned on my dad, screaming that he hadn't defended her. She turned on me, hissing that I'd betrayed the family. My dad muttered that this was getting out of hand, which earned him a kick in the shin from my dad and a snarl. "This is why I can't depend on you." I didn't say a word. I just went upstairs, closed my door, and listened to the house come apart below me. Word got out fast, I don't know how, but by the next day, everyone at school knew CPS had been at my house. Some kids avoided me, others whispered. A few came up and quietly said they were glad I spoke out, that their families weren't perfect either. She said that whatever happens here, I've already proven I can take pain and make something out of it. Meanwhile, my parents' social circle started shrinking. My mom's best friend took a step back. My dad's co-workers taunted him about CPS, and he came home angrier than usual. At dinner, my mom muttered about people turning on us like vultures. And the irony? They still haven't apologized. Not once. The lowest point came Friday night. My mom barged into my room without knocking. She told me I was destroying her life, that I was ungrateful after everything they'd given me, and that I'd regret siding with strangers over family. I told her I didn't side with anyone. I just told the truth. She slapped the door frame so hard, the picture on my wall rattled, and shouted that truth doesn't matter when people believe lies. Then she stormed out. I sat there shaking, not because I was afraid, but because I realized she'll never see it any other way. She'll never admit what she did was wrong. To her, I'll always be the traitor. My dad hasn't yelled. He hasn't hit. He hasn't defended me either. He just sits there quiet, sipping beer in front of the TV while the house burns down around him. The CPS worker asked me if I thought my dad could protect me. My answer was simple. No. That's the truth. He's not cruel. He's just absent, and absence can hurt almost as much as cruelty. The surprising twist? My sister's thawing. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's fear. But she knocked on my door Saturday and said quietly, "I didn't know it was that bad for you." We talked. Not long, not deep, but enough. She admitted she always thought I had it easy because I got good grades. I told her grades don't mean safety. She nodded, eyes down, and whispered that maybe we both got screwed, just in different ways. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first olive branch. Update 4. I never thought I would write this much about one night in a parking lot, but here we are. This will be my last update because the dust has settled and I need to start looking ahead instead of back. 2 weeks after my last post, CPS returned, but this time it wasn't just for a check-in. They arrived with papers. The caseworker explained that after reviewing everything, they decided the house was not a safe or stable environment. The papers were for temporary guardianship. I would live with a foster family until I turned 18, unless I preferred to go with a family friend instead. I think my parents believed CPS was bluffing all along. They thought they would scold us, write a report, and then move on. When they realized it was real, that I was leaving the house legally, the room grew cold. My mom shrieked. She didn't cry or beg. She shrieked. She claimed they couldn't do this, that it was kidnapping, that I was brainwashed. My dad stood up as if he would argue, but the officer reminded him that the court had already approved it. If he resisted, he would be arrested. So my mom screamed and my dad sat down, just like always. I went upstairs to pack. My hands shook as I stuffed clothes into my backpack. My sister appeared in the doorway pale, as if she wasn't sure what was happening. I told her I was leaving and she whispered, "Are you coming back?" I told her the truth. I didn't know. For a moment she seemed like she wanted to say more. Then she just nodded and walked away. I think that was her way of saying goodbye. When I came back down, my mom was furious and red-faced, throwing around words like ungrateful, liar, and traitor. My dad just stared at the floor. Nobody tried to stop me as I walked out with the caseworker. It was the quietest victory of my life. They first placed me with a foster family, an older couple a few towns over. Their house smelled like cinnamon. They had 2 lazy dogs, and they left a plate of cookies on the counter as if it were the most normal thing. That first night I cried into the pillow, not because I was sad, but because I realized how much tension I had been carrying until it was gone. After a week, my boss from the tutoring center offered to take me in. CPS approved it since she had space and already knew me. Moving in there felt less like being a case file and more like being a person again. She even set up a little desk for me in the corner of her office so I could have a quiet place to do college applications. I don't think I'll ever stop being grateful for that. Things didn't stop for my parents when I left. CPS kept investigating. My mom tried to spin the story to anyone who would listen. Neighbors, church friends, extended family, saying I had been manipulated by the system. The problem was that nobody believed her anymore. The newspaper published a follow-up piece. This time it wasn't just my essay. It was a report on parental neglect and character building gone wrong, featuring quotes from CPS explaining why they intervened. My parents' names were not printed, but everyone in town connected the dots. My dad started missing work, sick, more often than not. My mom barely left the house. My sister kept giving me updates about them. I guess it was her way of trying to talk to me. Their social circle shrank to nothing. Even my sister began spending more nights at friends' houses than at home. I heard from others that CPS flagged their file permanently. They will be monitoring for years, especially since my sister is still under 18. My mom blames me for bringing the government into our lives. I blame her for leaving me in a parking lot. Fair trade. Surprisingly, my sister and I started talking more after I left. One night she texted me, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it was like that." We have messaged back and forth since then, and she admitted she hated how much pressure they put on her, how every failure was ignored until it exploded. She said seeing me walk out made her realize they weren't just quirky or strict, they were toxic. We're not suddenly best friends, but for the first time it feels like we're allies instead of rivals. Last time I saw my mom was brutal. She came to a CPS meeting and tried to plead her case. She said I had misrepresented everything, that I was a manipulative storyteller, and she was just trying to teach me the resilience I would need for college. I sat across from her, calm, and said, "Resilience isn't built by being abandoned. It's built by being supported." Her face twisted and she began yelling right there in front of the caseworkers. She yelled about how ungrateful I was, how she'd sacrificed so much, and how I had turned her into a villain. The caseworker cut her off and said, "Ma'am, this meeting is over." And that was it. That was the last time I saw her. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.